Okay, so this is a guide to the art of placing content by finding where it best fits or fitting it to a place. I'm not going to go into creating content, which is probably something you guys are already good at, I assume. And I want to make a little distinction that PR is getting stuff in the media, whereas journalism is writing for the media. And I will provide silly pictures. So why would you want to work the media then? Well, you've got professional credibility. You can build your expertise in a niche by, say, guest writing on a subject you want to be seen as good at for an authority site. It's good for personal or subject SEO. Big publications obviously rank quite highly, and if you're seen on there writing about your subject, then that's only a good thing for you. Connections as well. You make a lot of interesting connections in the process, including with people who are in the media, who are good to know. It also opens the door for future work, so you're collecting bylines for your CV and possible freelancing, things like that. And it's sometimes fun and sometimes painful, depending on who you write for. So you probably get this already, but don't assume build it and they'll come. Making good content is only step one of actually getting it to go in the right places. A little bit about me. I'm a copywriter who does journalism. I'm not a journalist. I think there's a big difference. I started out writing technical, kind of boring stuff about like varicose veins and things, which is not fun. And then I got to go to FHM, which was more interesting, and I got to see how the big media industry worked from the inside. I did time at Computer Active, so I got to understand the tech a bit more, I suppose. I was then thrown out into the world to starve. I guess I did starve, but I also got some bylines in the Independent, Empire, Q, like big publications like that, despite not knowing anyone, being kind of antisocial, and working from home. And the main takeaway from the experience was that it's not hard to write this stuff. See there? This is an actual article. Someone read that. So, I'm going to talk to you. I had really great notes for this, but they disappeared, so I'm going to try and remember. Quite highlighted my pieces with The Guardian that I did as an example, so I want to talk to you about how I put that together. Essentially, I wrote and ghostwrote a series of careers and education articles for The Guardian on their blog. I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a relationship with the editor or whatever, I just sort of tweeted them an idea. Putting the article together was basically like structuring a deal. You had a bunch of tech journalists on one side and you had the editor on the other side, and you had to convince them all that it was a great idea to talk to me and put the whole thing together. The main sell was like, I just said, it's really easy. Please tell me 200 words about how you became a really big famous tech journalist. Most people like to talk about themselves, so it wasn't that hard. And then I took that back to the editor, and edited it a bit myself, and said, look, here you go, here's millions of words from all these famous people, you didn't have to do anything. So that was kind of the main thing I took away from that. Second example would be writing for IGN.com, who are a gaming website. I would call this pitching warm because I'd written for them a little in the past. But when you write for a publication like IGN, it's kind of an exercise in creative thinking because the subject has been done to death so badly. So my idea was to just keep sending ridiculous ideas to the editor. Like she was telling me, oh, this is kind of boring, can you make it a little more interesting? So the idea behind that really was just pitch a lot and don't really worry about how far out your ideas are, as long as you can justify them, why the target audience would like to read it. So I did. So I'm going to talk about two journalism content types, and I will simplify a little. Also, that's quite a profound philosophical statement if you think about it. Do you simply simplify? I don't think so. So, content type number one is news. You're all very familiar with that. Again, this is news because a man was killed to death. You think about it, why is that news? Because it's strange, it's different. People will talk about it. News is anything that people talk about that's tied to an event that has happened. So the fact that someone made an error there, that's news itself. And it also looks funny. It's easy to make a tie into the news, provided the story isn't lightning fast. For example, using Michael Jackson's death as an example, good luck trying to get something in for that, because for a start, the story broke incredibly quickly. There were some people who had privileged access, which most journalists didn't, and that's really the domain of the pros. That's the, you hear that phrase, getting scooped. You start playing with news too much, you spend a lot of time pitching stuff that's already been published. It's usually shorter than features and ranks better in the short term because suddenly people are really interested in a keyword. It's easier to do if it's in your niche, if it's like the thing that you cover all the time, which is why journalists have a beat. And as I say, it's more the domain of pros. I find it really tiring to try and cover news in any regard, and that's why I've avoided calling myself a journalist. Content type number 2, features. This is a guide, get girls to go fishing. So someone out there, I assume, paid money for that. There's lots of other guides as well, but they weren't very family friendly, so I didn't put them. So features, I think, is more interesting because the content is evergreen. It's not time bound, so it's stuff that people want to know about regardless of what time of the year it is, i.e. how-to guide or a piece about a historical event. It's usually easier to write if you know the subject in advance, but it requires more research and you get a bigger word count. It's less compelling in the short term because it's not newsworthy usually, but in the long term it gets more hits if it's good. And you can tie it to the news as well, so a stupid example, but how to get re-elected like Obama, that's not really a sensible kind of tie, but provided you can provide something useful such as how to, and then tie it to an event that happened, that's a evergreen feature that has a news tie, and those are really good. Here are handy tips to consider when pitching. You have the publishing cycle, which is the speed of content. So it depends. This is all really, as I say, simplified. Magazines might be thinking in 3 to 9 month increments or longer. Whereas with websites, it could be anything from like, I'll file it immediately to something that they're thinking about next year. But it's important to ask the editor this. If there's one thing I could say, is you're there to serve the editor, find out what they want. The other thing is the editorial calendar, so the direction of the content. What do they want to cover this year? What have they already got on their books? What ties into current news or upcoming events? So if it's a lifestyle publication, for example, can you make a tie into Christmas? And using an example from FHM, we had Easter coming up, and it's like, how do we tie FHM into Easter cover girl bunny party? So it's pretty simple, but it has to be relevant to the publication. And again, ask. You're there to serve. Going on about the kind of serving, there's a mindset I would call it to pitching people, which is a provider mindset. A lot of people sort of are afraid to go to a publication with ideas because they think they're intruding, but you're really there because you have something valuable to offer. You're fixing problems. They have a problem which is not enough content. I mean, there's always a need for more, isn't there? So when you pitch, it's essentially a gift that you're offering to the editor, and you fix the problem better than everyone else by providing better content than everyone else, because it's a pretty competitive industry. The easiest way to be the problem solver is to do your market research, which means basically before you're pitching on a certain industry, having an understanding of the main things within that industry, like the 80% of stuff that people know about, and then asking the editor specifically what they want, asking them about their editorial calendar. Always goes back to asking, really. Just some final additional points. To manage expectations, so don't expect massive results from the get-go. It can be quite dispiriting at times. Editors can be guarded and not keen to work with freelancers, so have people skills, be friendly, be nice. People work with people they like, usually. It's a numbers game, so pitch often and to a lot of people and expect to spend a lot of time pitching, and you have to keep sending emails over and over again and calling people, being persistent. But there's a line between persistence and annoyance, and you have to be careful. think about citizen journalism as well. It's one of the buzzwords, but it's a trend and an opportunity. You can own your own publication on your own like specific subject area. So if you really like macrame or something, have a macrame blog, because not many people know what that is. And then also work with the larger traditional ones. You know, that's not an either-or situation. And also relate what you're publishing on to your business or career goals. So the whole point of this is to use use your position as a content provider and the media to sort of put yourself, to show the world what it is that you know about to further your career, essentially. You know, what do you want people to know you for? And what do you want Google to come up with when it sees your name? I think that's it. Yeah, and content is king.
So I noticed you've got quite a lot of followers on your Twitter, for example. How do you tie in the content you write to the people that are following you on Twitter? How do you get them involved and really branch it out into your community? And how can that help someone who's trying to break into, for example, the journalism industry to really get into the top layer?
That's a really good question. I don't really have so much of a sort of strategy for that. I tend to, anytime I get something worth reading, anytime I get something I'd like people to see published, I'll put it on my portfolio and I'll tweet it once, maybe twice. But at the end of the day, I sort of see it more, having a lot of people on Twitter is a bit like, it's useful, I don't want to listen to words, it's a bit like saying I can drive a lot of traffic in the short term to this article, and it's one of those things I emphasize. But it's not really so clear cut, like there seems to be you can't predict what people are going to do. So I don't really know how to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone coming. If you'd like to go into the other room, there's more mum wine. So go and enjoy yourself. Thanks. No, I'm kidding. No, it's fine. No, it's interesting. I like the